curious, engaging tone. There is a single private citizen who owns more land than the entire state of Delaware, and he used it to orchestrate America's most successful wildlife comeback. To see the scale of this achievement, look at where he started. In 1989, a 113,000-acre hillside in Montana was effectively dead, a barren, brown moonscape. Decades of overgrazing by previous cattle operations had entirely stripped the soil, wiping out the native grasses that hold the ecosystem together. Government conservation programs moved too slowly to address this level of ruin. Reversing it required a radical, privately funded intervention to save the land. That intervention came from media mogul Ted Turner. When he paid $22 million for this wasteland, his own financial advisors begged him to reconsider, and local ranchers mocked the decision. He was fighting a historical tragedy. By the 1890s, the American bison population had collapsed, dropping from 60 million animals to fewer than 1,000. Turner's plan was to buy up failing Western ranches and recreate a functioning Great Plains ecosystem from the 1800s. But he knew a charity model would eventually fail. To ensure the animal's survival across generations, he had to build a vertically integrated business that could pay for its own existence. The turning point began the Flying D Ranch. They released bison that had spent their lives in small government pens, animals that initially seemed confused by the sudden absence of fences. Then an old bull caught a scent on wind and took off. Within seconds, the entire herd was thundering across the prairie, moving over land their ancestors hadn't touched in over a century. This diagram shows the biological science at work. While cattle stay in one area until vegetation is destroyed, bison migrate in a continuous sweeping line. Their hooves break up dirt, stimulating the soil and triggering rapid grass growth in their wake. Within 10 years, the shift was so dramatic that NASA satellites tracking the property from space could see the land turning from brown to green. The bison functioned as the biological workforce that physically rebuilt the ecosystem's foundation. Managing 2 million acres of rewilded land requires a massive scientific infrastructure. Nature cannot simply be left to recover on its own. This map illustrates the field hardware. GPS collars track real-time locations, predict birth windows, and detect illness before symptoms appear. Drone and weather data integrate into the system, allowing managers to move herds to areas optimized for soil health. As the vegetation recovered, apex predators naturally returned to the ranches. Rather than viewing them as a threat to his business, Turner embraced them. Predators naturally cull the sick and weak, creating a selection pressure that results in a more resilient bison population. This stability allowed Turner to save other endangered species, like the Bison tortoise, a prehistoric reptile that can weigh up to 100 pounds. By pairing ancient biological patterns with cutting-edge data, Turner engineered a self-regulating, high-tech wilderness. But this leads to a critical question. How does a private citizen fund a conservation project across 15 states without depleting their fortune? He created an economic flywheel. He launched Ted's Montana Grill, a restaurant chain designed to build a large-scale consumer market for bison meat. The model worked perfectly because the bison product is significantly healthier than beef and requires far less environmental impact to produce. The second half of the flywheel comes from premium hunting programs. Wealthy individuals pay tens of thousands of dollars for access, and that revenue directly funds habitat restoration and species recovery. Turner converted the traditional conservation model, frequently an endless financial drain, into a profitable, self-sustaining industry. The results are significant. Turner's ranches now generate over $100 million annually, while serving as a global hub for ecological research. This revenue created hundreds of high-paying jobs for biologists and ranch hands in rural towns, where opportunities had been disappearing for decades. Ecological restoration creates a viable engine for rural economic revival. Today, 51,000 bison thrive on Turner's land. That represents roughly 10% of the entire North American population. The return of wild Mexican gray wolf pups, the first born on the property in over half a century, serves as physical proof of this recovery. By aligning biological needs with an economic flywheel, Turner proved that private land ownership can be one of the most effective tools for protecting our natural world.